So we are in the middle of this rather long mimer, but we are actually like there's somewhat of an end in sight. I do see that a few pages away, but somewhere there's an end in sight. And we came to an amazing, amazing point last week that was so powerful, so uplifting, I felt, for everyone. We have been in this mimer focusing on the words of Shabbos, Mincha, Shmon Esrei, where we have the special inserts because it's Shabbos, Mincha. And we explained in this mimer that these inserts are referring to varying levels of Chesed, Gevur, Tiferes. Ata Echad B'Shemcha Echad, Mikam Yisrael Goyecha Ba'aretz, Chesed, Gevur, Tiferes, Koidim HaTzimtzum, before the primordial constriction. Tiferes Gedula, Tiferes Yeshua, etc. Chesed, Gevur, Tiferes, post, after Tzimtzum Harishon, the primordial constriction, in, as we call it, Adam Kadmon, the first revelation of the will of Hashem, all the way down through Keser of Atzilus, the divine will as it is in the beginning of Hishalshalus, creation, the four worlds. In Chesed Gevur Tiferes of Atzilus. Menucha, all the three Menuchas, Chesed Gevur Tiferes, as Chesed Gevur Tiferes of Atzilus descends to Netzach Yisod of Atzilus. And we went into a lot of detail. We were discussing at length this concept of Chesed Gevur Tiferes prior to Tzimtzum Harishon. And how could that be? There is no dimensions prior to Tzimtzum Harishon. There are no spheros prior to Tzimtzum Harishon. So what do we mean Chesed Gevur Tiferes prior to Tzimtzum Harishon? And we unpacked it at length and we proved, the Rebbe proved, we just read it, how there is a Chesed Gevur and Tiferes, the antecedents of Chesed Gevur Tiferes, what will become Chesed Gevur Tiferes, existent even before Tzimtzum Harishon. And then we delved into this more and said, wait a minute, because we're saying the words in the Shemona Esrei is Nasata, Tiferes Gedula, Tiferes Yeshua, Nasata. Nasata means we said moving from one domain to another. So we're moving from the Ata Echad, Shimcha Echad, Chesed Gevur Tiferes, prior to Tzimtzum Harishon, prior to the first primordial constriction, to post the primordial constriction. And we're saying Nasata, yeah, like you move from here to here, you move your coin from here to here, you move your car from here to here. We move Chesed Gevur Tiferes from prior to Tzimtzum Harishon to post Tzimtzum Harishon. No, that makes no sense. No way, because it's a totally different reality. How could something that's prior to Tzimtzum Harishon be similar to enough to be given over to post Tzimtzum Harishon? That makes no sense. And the Rebbe said, actually, you're right, it does make no sense. No, it did not happen. So what does this mean, Nasata? And we explained it means the revelation, the external dimension of those energies of Chesed Gevur Tiferes, what will morph to become in later dimensions, Chesed Gevur Tiferes, that revelation, that shine, that Giloi is what's given over to be the inspiration for, so to speak, to be the vision for Chesed Gevur Tiferes post Tzimtzum Harishon, after the primordial constriction. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of ink on that, and we continued with more details, but that was the major point. And then we said, and why are we talking about all this? Because all of these levels, Chesed Gevur Tiferes prior to Tzimtzum Harishon and post Tzimtzum Harishon, still so dizzyingly high, Adam Elyon, Keser, and Chesed Gevur Tiferes Batzilus, and Chesed Gevur Tiferes as she comes to Netzach Yisod Batzilus. All of this is drawn down by the Jew. We are the movers and shakers. How could we pull strings on these forces theoretically so much higher than us? Because they're not. That's only theory. The reality is, it says about the Jewish people, Alu b'machshava. We went up. We are ascended. We are elevated in God's thoughts. Not only are the Jewish people, what defines as a Jewish person? The godly soul. So the godly soul emanates from the thoughts of God. And he and his thoughts are one, hu v'chachmaso echad, as it explains in Kabbalah. So if the neshama comes from the thoughts of God, the neshama comes from God himself. Not only that, I mean, it's hard to say not only that, we're talking about that, but alu b'machshava, even higher, elevated, ascended, transcended within this dimension itself, within this domain itself. That's how high the Jew is. So we're that high. We can actually, through our service, access these levels, draw down these levels, integrate these levels, are able to manipulate them and bring them down for the benefit of this world and mankind, because we come from beyond any of this. We come from Hashem himself, beyond any of these levels. And we can therefore manipulate them and draw them down and have all the brachos that come through them come down through little, very significant us. That was the end of that ice, and it sort of seamlessly flows into the next ice, which we're going to begin to learn, and which has a very similar perspective. So going back to our frame of reference, which is Shabbos, Mincha, Shmones, right? After those 4 sets of 3, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes before Tzimtzum Rishon, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes after Tzimtzum Rishon, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes in Chesed Gevurah Tiferes Atzilos, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes within this lower domain of Netzach Yisod of Atzilos. After those like nice, neat, so to speak, 4 sets of 3, there's one extra line. Menucha Shlema She'ata Roitze Ba. A menucha Shlema, a complete peace, She'ata, that you, Roitze Ba, want in her. And if you remember, and if you don't, I forgive you because we're human and I definitely won't remember. But a long time ago, when we started this mimer and we got into the initial questions, or not the very beginning initial questions, but a little bit later initial questions, this was one of the questions. So we're actually answering one of the initial questions of this very long, detailed Hasidic thought. What's it doing here? Once we understand the structure, the prototype, we get it. Oh, it's a set of 3. Oh, it's another set of 3. Oh, it's another set of 3. Oh, it's another set of 3. Wait, now it's a 4th? What's that doing in all my nice, neat sets of 3s? Because it's not, oh, and then there was a 4th, like 3, 3, 3, and 3, and plus we have a tag along. No. That complete peace that you dwell in it is referring to something vaster and different in these 4 levels. So what is it referring to? So the Rebbe says we have a very interesting letter here that's going to be our key. We have a shin. Menucha shlema, a complete peace. She'ata. That's one word in Hebrew, a combined word of she, that, and ata, you. So she'ata, that you. But, you know, we all have what we have and what we need to get, what we have and what we appreciate and what we're looking for. So when we're looking at these things and we're like, okay, what am I looking for in this? What does this give me? What's the point of this? She'ata, that you. The Rebbe says, understand the depth here. Now this is, honestly, it sounds almost Kabbalistic, but this is Hasidus. This is a Hasidic mimer. She'ata is a fusion of she and ata. In translating into English, she means that and ata means you. She'ata rotzeba, menucha shlema, a complete peace. She'ata, that you, God, rotzeba, you want in her, you want this complete peace in the Shabbos, in God's day of rest. The Rebbe says if we unpack this, there's a lot of depth here. She'ata, a shin, she, that, and ata, you. The Rebbe says, you know what that shin stands for? The initial line, so to speak, of Chesed Gevurah Tiferes. Meaning, if you could think of a shin, not how you write it in script, but in what we call Ksav Ashuri, in block letters, a shin has 3 lines, right? Each of those lines end in almost like a little yud-like, so to speak, something going on there, some decorative embossed something. That's the shin. So what do you think that symbolizes? She, a shin, containing 3 lines that extend from the shin, but all in one letter, in the letter shin. What could that be representing? Thinking of everything we've been talking about for all these weeks. 3 in 1. The 3 heads in 1 letter. Well, the Rebbe says it means exactly that. A shin, that's interesting, of course, in various places of Hasidus, we speak about letters as they are contextually appropriate. So, for example, in the Maimer of Basi Lagani, we speak about the shin, and you have sheker and the keresh and the beam, and it's not like emes, which is solid. The shin is just on a little point. So there's a lot there developing that shin. Here, the Rebbe is saying something completely different. Here we're talking about in high levels of godliness and holiness. She, the Rebbe says, you have three lines, three legs, if you will, extending from the base of that shin upwards, three lines, and all of them are about equal. They're about the same size. They're basically about the same power. We have this one letter, the shin, with the three legs that all are fused into one entity. So this symbolizes these three kavim, these three lines. What three lines? Well, what three lines have we been talking about? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. These three lines, as they all are fused in the existence of one letter. So it's like 3 in 1, which means it's not really it. Because what do you mean 3 in 1? What do you mean it's one letter? In one letter I have chesed, and in one letter I have gvura, and in one letter I have tiferes. I don't even have anything in one letter. So you don't really see any of it. You don't see not chesed, not gvura, not tiferes. You're not seeing anything. But within the power of these three letters, again, in a more latent state, is the line of chesed, the line of gevura, and the line of tiferes, all completely united and fused to the degree that it's literally one letter, that letter shin. That's the power of the shin. The word isn't shin. The word is she'ata, right? If we think of our davening, this mimer, at least we can keep referencing phrases. We know, we hopefully say this every week. Menucha shlema she'ata roitze ba. We're focusing on the word she'ata. And we split it into two concepts, two syllables. She'ata. She, the shin, the three lines, chesed, gevurah, tiferes, as they are united within each other, so there's no beginning and no end and no middle, and it's just one entity. And ata, which is what we call noichach. Ata is like what we say in English, second person, meaning we have first person, I, we have second person, you, and we have third person, he, she, it, because if I say he, I'm not looking straight at you. I would say you. If I say I'm not looking at anyone else, I'm looking at myself. So first person I, second person you, third person he. And in the language of Lashon HaKodesh, and also as Hasidus discusses these terms, there's a Lashon Noichach, the present, you. And there's a Lashon Nistar, the hidden, not present, the pronoun he, she, it. She'ata, ata is you. The initial you is you of God's giving, you of God's kindness, you of God's compassion. Meaning, when I'm saying you, I'm talking about Hashem, the first foundational you is Hashem as the giver, as we discussed actually at length earlier in this Maimah, right? This is Hashem's nature. Teva ha'tov l'heitiv. He is goodness. He embodies goodness. He only does goodness. So chesed is him beginning, middle, and end. So what did I do in unpacking this word she'ata? She, again, we're splitting it, so to speak, into two syllables. Ata is two syllables, but we'll pretend. She'ata. She, the shin, three lines, what we call three heads or three legs of the shin, but all is one letter. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, totally fused and united that you don't know anything. You just see the union. Ata is already when we're spreading our wings and separating. Because ata is you. We said the you, if we're talking about Hashem, is Hashem's chesed. Hashem's giving. That's him. You, Hashem, you are chesed. So she, chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes are like one. Ata, you, chesed, now already they're separating. Because now already we have a separate domain, a separate dimension, a separate flavor. And this is called flavor chesed. And you can take a different flavor, and that's called flavor gevurah. You can take a different flavor, that's called flavor tiferes. Pick whatever flavor you want, right? Foundational, flavor chesed. Really good, really great, really yummy, really perfect. Maybe sometimes you have to leave because you have pressing concerns like the kids on your head. But in general, this idea of giving, of beneficence, of you, of chesed. So what's she'ata? She'ata is the fusion when the power of She and the power of Ata have become so one, it's like one word. Not it's like one word. It actually is one word. Menucha shlema, a complete peace. What's the complete peace? She'ata. That this power that's so high, it's even higher than anything we said before, because chesed, gvur, tiferes aren't even separated as chesed and gvur and tiferes. They're like a 3-in-1 deal. So it's not just chesed, gvur, tiferes, koydem tzimtzum harishon. Chesed, gvur, tiferes prior to the primordial constriction. It's chesed, gvur, tiferes prior to that, because it's not even chesed, gvur, tiferes. It's a shin. But from the shin are the 3 lines that will evolve and develop and someday become chesed, gvur, tiferes. And that's completely fused with ata, chesed, ata, one word, 3-in-1, the antecedents of them that they're not even developed on any level, completely fused with full-blown chesed. So we're talking here about such a high dimension that we say she'ata, right, Seba, you want this. This is the level you want. This is such a high dimension. And guess what? You know what the Rebbe's going to say? Comes all the way back to the Jew. We draw this down as well. We draw this down. We can't even understand what we're talking about here. Understand? Don't understand. We draw this down. What are we talking about? Again, I'm still trying to explain this shata. We said, is 3-in-1. It's so high, it's chesed, gvur, tiferes, that cannot yet be articulated as chesed, gvur, tiferes. It's just like one letter that contains within it the 3 heads, the 3 lines of what will be chesed, gvur, tiferes. And then we have ata, fully developed chesed. And it's one word. How could that be? How could you take this dimension so nuanced, so refined, so subtle, that we don't yet see a chesed, a gvur, a tiferes. We see one letter, which is an allusion to, meaning it's so high level that we don't even have here chesed, gvur, tiferes. And then we're fusing it with ata, chesed, point blank, simple. That doesn't work together, but it did. It's one word. So what is this? So the Rebbe says, the only thing this could be is this is how the Rebbe terms it, the pshitus of the Ein Sof, the absolute simplicity of the infinity of God, because in the presence of that simplicity, it's interesting because in our world, simplicity doesn't sound like such a compliment. In the world of Hasidus, it's a very big one, because the ultimate simplicity is God. Simplicity meaning not complex. Right. So not complex sounds like simple. Right. Simple, not complex. That doesn't sound like a put up. It sounds like a put down. We're saying no. It means an awareness that in the end of the day, so to speak, in the beginning of the day, actually, and in the ultimate end of the day, it's all simple. It's all him. Like, I'm giving a mushal for this, which I don't know if anyone's going to relate to this mushal anyway, but if you do, it might help. And even if you know the mushal, if you understand the mushal, it still might not help. But I'm thinking of the periodic table of elements, which, at least in America, is usually hanging on a wall in the science classroom. And when I was growing up, there's like, at one point there was 90 some elements, it became 120 some elements, many elements, very complicated. Each one has its sign, each one has its powers, very complex stuff. And these are the elements, these are the foundational building blocks of all the creation. And everything you see is a combination of these, I don't know what it is, 127, 130, 140, however many elements they discovered. But then when they discovered more, science found out that there's not 120, 30, 40, whatever elements. There's something simpler than those elements. And there's 7 of them. 7, what's called the 7 strings theory, because everything here is theories. The 7 strings theory. That all of creation, meaning all of that periodic table of elements, is not 120 or plus building blocks of creation. There's 7. So suddenly we made it so much simpler and deeper and took more intellect to discover and there's more power to it. So as we're simplifying, we're not watering down, we're coming to the essence core. And that's what we mean here about Hashem. When we're saying the simplicity of Hashem, the pshitus of Ein Sof, it means that essence core that's not complex, because all there is him. Complexity is like I have a combination of elements. And if I look at the world, it seems like there's a lot of combination of elements. And I could learn Hasidus, or for that matter, Kabbalah, and yeah, I could talk. Not that I understand what I'm saying, of course. There's worlds, and there's spheres, and there's Gan Edens, and there's angels, and there's this type of angel, and there's that type of angel. I can make it very, very complex. I could throw a lot of words out that make me sound, I don't know, intelligent, but or at least confusing. But within and the core of all that complexity, of all that verbiage, is the pshitus of the Ein Sof, is the absolute simplicity that all there is God, Zehu. And that level is deeper and higher than any of those words that we're using to describe levels, because it's the core. So the Rebbe is saying that when we're looking here, because at first we looked at Chesed Gevurah Tiferes before Tzimtzum Rishon, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes after Tzimtzum Rishon, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes and Atzilus, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes and Netzach Yisod of Atzilus. And we said all of those 4 dimensions we draw down. That's the power of the Jew. How do we have this power? Alu b'machshava. We come from the machshava keduma, from God's thoughts, and hu v'chachmaso echad. He and his thoughts are one, and we don't just come from the thoughts of God. Alu b'machshava. We ascend in his thoughts. So we are that high. You might not think of ourselves so great, but we are. We just have no clue. We're not just in disguise, fooling the rest of the world by our disguise. Our disguise is so good, we fool ourselves. We fool the rest of the world because we look human. We look like another human being. Like there's 8 billion mankind, and 0.0 something percentage of that population is Jews. And Jews, for some reason, make a lot of noise, and for some reason, got a lot of attention. Often it's negative, sometimes it's positive. For some reasons, you have a lot of power, but they're people, right? I mean, we don't really think they have horns. We really know they're people. Wrong. So, it's like Yaakov dressed in Esau's clothing. So we fool the rest of the world to think we're just like them, and we're such good actors and spies, and in this illusion, concealing our identity, that we fool ourselves. And we don't understand our power. And the Maimer is saying, you're really powerful. This is all the way up to Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, Kodem Tzimtzum Harishon, and you're drawing it down. Now we're saying, and even more, because now we're going higher than Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, Kodem Tzimtzum Harishon. Now we're saying, we're not even talking about that. We're talking about such a level that it's the pshitus. It's the simplicity, it's the core, before there's any of these terms, before any of these terms matter, before any of these terms exist. And how do we know it has to be such a level? Because the Rebbe says that's the only level that could fuse she and ata. Remember, that's what we're talking about. Menucha shlema, what's the complete piece? She, ata became one thing, she, ata. She, the antecedents of it all, that the Chesed Gevurah Tiferes aren't even developed, we call it Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, and ata, which is a full-blown development, Chesed, are one word. Well, what fused she and ata? The pshitus of the Ein Sof. Rotzeh ba, what you want. You, who you really are, your absolute core, Ein Sof, that power, everything just like shrinks. Everything just like loses its separation I and becomes one, becomes fused in the presence of that you, that pshitus of the Ein Sof. So this phrase, based on all this, the Rebbe says, Menucha shlema she'at rotzeh ba, right? That addendum after we had 4 times Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, then we have this extra phrase. It's talking about higher than any of those Chesed Gevurah Tiferes. It's talking about the pshitus of the Ein Sof that's so high it could fuse these things together, and that too is drawn down by the Jew. Meaning, not only are we the movers and shakers on Kodem Tzimtzum Harishon, on Chesed Gevurah Tiferes Kodem Tzimtzum Harishon, also on the pshitus of the Ein Sof. That's also what we're having possession of here. That's also what we're enumerating in our tefillos on Mincha of Shabbos. Also, Menucha Shleima Shatzarot Seba, the Pshitus of the Ein Sof. That too we can draw down. And again, who do we think we are? We're drawing down the Pshitus of the Ein Sof? Yes, we are. That's the point. That's the point the Rebbe is making here. It's an incredibly powerful, practical, and simple point. We have this power because the neshama is coming from the machshava of the Eibishter, and he is his thought. So the neshama is coming from the Eibishter himself. And within that domain of the Eibishter's thought, him, olu b'machshava, we're at the height of that machshava. We ascended in machshava, in God thought. That's who we are. So the world has no clue who we are, and we have no clue who we are. And the Maimer is saying, this is who we are. This is the power of the Jew. And when you say recognize it is the wrong word, because whatever, we still go back, and maybe right now you're staring at your dirty dishes. Mine are graciously waiting for me till after I finish this class. But you're looking around the mess of your house. You're thinking what you have to deal with tomorrow. You remember vaguely at Shabbos Mevarchim that can put a little more pressure on you. You're exhausted. All the stuff every one of us have in our life all the time. We're tired. We're drained. We have so much on our plate that we get distracted from who we really are. And the Maimer is saying, please remember who you are. Please remember your absolute power. Because it's hard to use it if you don't know you have it. And if you allow yourself to be identified as exhausted, overwhelmed, too much to handle, can't handle it, then you're never going to access who you are. But the Rebbe is saying, this is who you are. These high powers, maybe I didn't explain it well, you don't even know what I'm talking about here. These high powers, the Pshitas of the Ein Sof, this too is in the grasp of the Jew. That's what we're saying here. This is the point the Rebbe really wants us to understand here, that we are doing this, that we are pulling down this Pshitas of the Ein Sof. So that was sort of like completing that thought. Now the Rebbe goes on extending this idea of this Pshitas of the Ein Sof. And of course, the question, which nobody's asking, is, maybe nobody wants to know, is how in the world are we accessing the Pshitas of the Ein Sof? And the Rebbe says, very simple. Because you have this Pshitas in your own neshama. There's the Pshitas of the Yid. This simple, again, simple not meaning, oh, she's simple, she's not so smart. She's simple, she's not so learned. She's simple, she's core. That's what we mean by simple. Simple means like indivisible, because it's core. So Pshita of Ein Sof means this indivisible core God energy. And that indivisible core God energy, as reflected in the words of our davening, if you followed it or not, it's fine. You will take it on faith and believe that what I'm saying is true. That is drawn down because in our neshama, we also have that indivisible core, otherwise known as pshitus. And that is the yechida element of our neshama. And of course, we know we have 5 levels of soul, nefesh, ruch, neshama, chaya, yechida. And we know yechida is the highest of the levels, but still not core soul. There's deeper than yechida, because yechida is a name, right? It says, chamesh shemos nikru'ullah. The soul is called by 5 names, which, as the Rebbe says in other places, like Toldos Nambez, proves that the soul's not nefesh, ruch, neshama, chaya, or for that matter, yechida. We used to erroneously say yechida was essence, and the Rebbe says it's not essence. It's a name, it's a level, but it's the highest level we can talk about. So often, since it's the highest thing we can talk about, as we talk about it, we're really including everything deeper than it, which would mean the very core and essence of the soul as well. And because of that pshitus of the yechida, that indivisible quality, that core quality, it pulls that pshitus of the Ein Sof. Like if you're somewhere with maybe a few people you don't know, and you're attracted or drawn to maybe someone who seems familiar, comfortable, more your style. So you can feel comfortable there, as versus the other people that are not your style and you don't know them and you're not comfortable. Maybe you'll get comfortable at the moment you're not. So to speak, that's a poor muscle. But the pshitus of the Yechida draws down the pshitus of the Ein Sof, because they both have this element of core, of indivisible, of nothing simpler than that entity. So that's the power that every Jew has. You don't have to be a learned Jew. You don't have to be a smart Jew. You don't have to be a Hasidic Jew. You're a Jew. A Jew means you have a godly soul. If you don't have a godly soul, you're not a Jew. So every Jew has this godly soul. And the core level we talk about, which again is only a level, but it's the highest level. So it's also referring to things deeper than that level. Yechida has this quality of pshitus. And with that pshitus, it's drawing down the pshitus of the Ein Sof. To understand this more, the Rebbe starts analyzing a bit the soul. Because, of course, we know there are levels in soul. And there's a level in soul that we call pnimi. And there's a level in soul we call makif. There's inner and outer. Now, obviously, when we're talking about inner and outer, depending on the context, inner could be the better one or outer could be the better one. Because what are we referring to? Inner would mean more constricted powers, but it also means more internalized. Outer would mean more powerful, but it also means non-internalized. So the soul has her inner dimension and her outer, what we call makif dimension. Within that outer makif dimension, we have, generally speaking, two levels, which is not only true for neshama, but in general and true if we speak about this concept of makif. We have what we call makif hakarov and makif harachok. We have the closer makif and the further makif. So which's better? Well, again, it depends what you're talking about. If I'm talking about pure power, makif harachok is even more powerful than makif hakarov. If I'm talking about connectivity, makif hakarov is going to be closer to me than makif harachok. So the examples commonly given, again, these aren't mine. This is classical Hasidus in discussing these terms. Compares makif hakarov, the closer encompassing energy, to clothing, and makif harachok, the further encompassing energy, to a house. And it's very simple if you think of what you wear, your clothing, versus a garment, versus a house, versus a room. Because if I'm wearing this outfit, this dress, the sweater, and I lost weight or I gained weight, or my friend who's bigger than me or smaller than me is wearing it, it's going to look different. It's going to shift to the wearer. I mean, we all know that. We all have experiences with our clothing. So that shows that a garment, even though it's outside of you, so it's makif, but it's very affected by you because every wearer is going to make it look a bit different. So that's the nuance of makif hakarov. Then you have makif harachok. Makif harachok is not affected by me. Like in the cartoons, if you have a lot of people in a room, the walls bulge, but not in real life. So if in my house now, there's me, my husband, and two children, or if in my house, there's me, my husband, and Kanai many children, plus daughter-in-laws, plus grandchildren, the house doesn't change. The house is the house is the house. We could say, yeah, the house is very changed, a lot of different energy going on. That's true. But we're talking about the structure. The structure of the house does not bulge or shrink depending on how many inhabitants are in that house. Our head space might, but not the structure of the walls of the house. So we have in a soul the pnimi element, the within constricted and smallest element that's getting within the parameters, and at the same time, the most, in a sense, affecting us because it's closest to within. Then we have makif. That's already a whole different dimension because it's like, so to speak, outside, not really outside, but like relating from a distance. Why is it from a distance? Because it's too powerful to get in. Okay, so makif on one hand is more remote, but on the other hand, much more powerful. And then within makif, I've got these two dimensions. The clothing dimension, makif hakarov, the house dimension, makif harachok, where again, makif hakarov, on one hand is too big, on the other hand, it's still relating to me and affected by me because the garment changes with the wearer. If I'm looking just at the pure power, wow, makif harachok, that's so powerful. Not only is it a makif, it's a rachok makif. It's not affected by me at all. So those are these three dimensions we can look at within understanding on one level, one way of structuring soul. Why are we going into all this? We're trying to understand and appreciate our yechida as this pshitas, which therefore draws down the pshitas, this absolute simplicity, core, indivisible element of God himself. When we're looking at these powers of soul, well, what seems limited is the pnimi kaichas, right? Because they're small enough to get inside. Okay, but makif isn't limited because it's outside. And then we're like, well, Kiafar is a little limited because the garment's affected by the wearer, and a different wearer, it looks different. So makif hakarov, even though it's too powerful to get in, it's strong, but it is somewhat limited. But then the Rebbe said, even makif harachok, no, not makif harachok, not the house. The house isn't affected by the inhabitants, small or large. It's just pure power. The makif harachok element of my soul is just power. It's not limited. The Rebbe says, sorry, it actually is. Why is it? Because the Rebbe says everything here is in a continuum. It's levels of powers. And there's a relationship between the levels. So pnimi relates to makif hakarav, which relates to makif harachok. So because of its association, so to speak, because makif harachok is like extension, like the next step past makif hakarov, which is the next step past pnimi, it also shares limitation as the dimension of makif hakarov shares a limitation. As the dimension of pnimi has a limitation. So pnimi, I know for sure is limited. It got in. It's small enough. Makif hakarov, I understand, also has a limitation because it's affected by the wearer. And makif harachok is the second dimension of makif, right? There's makif hakarov and makif harachok, and they're both makifim. So if makif hakarov has a limitation, makif harachok, which is part and parcel of that broad concept, also must have a limitation. So sorry, guys. Even your power of makif harachok has a limitation. But you know what's not affected by limitation? The pshitas of the yechida. Pshitas of the yechida is within all and not affected or limited by anything. It's interesting because the way the Rebbe is describing the pshitas of the yechida is how Chassidus often describes Chassidus, the oil element, right? If you think of that idea, like a lot of Chanukah sichos, Yutes Kislev sichos, the concept of how oil spreads, flavors all, and is separate from all, right? We've all heard of this at some point. Oil meaning essence, oil meaning soul, oil meaning Hasidus. So you have a few drops of oil, and it spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and gives flavor to the whole, whatever you're making. And if you have the oil sit, it will separate from the other elements. And of course, we know an oil stain, like that's a really hard one to get rid of. It gets in there. So oil penetrates all, permeates all, flavors all, and is remote from all. And that's like this idea of yechida. Yechida is not makif harachok. Because makif harachok has a shaychus to makif hakarov, and therefore it's limited as this is limited. Yechida is not limited because she's not within any box, even the box called makif harachok. She's beyond the boxes. How do I see she's beyond the boxes? And again, it's so interesting because how the Rebbe is now describing yechida. Again, it's now this is to be very reminiscent. I hope everyone has learned at some point Inyan Shel Torah HaChasidus, translated in English, on the essence of Hasidus, where again the Rebbe is talking about the power of Hasidus, and the Rebbe explains how Hasidus is different than any other dimension of Torah. We've got Pshat, we've got Remez, we've got Jerush, we've got Said, and we've got Hasidus. Hasidus is not Kabbalah for dummies, simplified Kabbalah. Kabbalah in the language you understand. Kabbalah is a different layer. Kabbalah is Said, the esoteric dimension. Pshat, Remez, Jerush, Said, and then there's this fifth element. It's called Hasidus. And Pshat, Remez, Jerush, and Said are all within boxes, and therefore obscured by the boxes. Hasidus doesn't have a box. And as she doesn't have a box, she flows through everything. She flavors everything like the oil. And therefore, we can take Hasidus and flavor Nigla. and flavor a midrash, and flavor a Rambam, and flavor a Rashi, and flavor a piece of Kabbalah. Because she affects, flavors everything, but is remote from all, beyond all, because she's core. And that's the point that I was making about the Yechida here. Not within a box, not even with a box of Makif Harecha. No boxes, and therefore really affects every level of our soul. Again, just like Hasidus is flavoring every level of Torah, the Yechida flavors every level of soul with her power, but stays remote from all of them. She's never in the box of any of them. She's never limited to any of them. Even Makif Harecha has limitations. Yechida has no limitations because she never gets stuck in a box. She's pshitus. She's that oil within our soul, flavoring our soul, illuminating our soul, shining a light on all dimensions of our soul, but remote. Pshitus. You can't grasp her. You can sense her. You can't grip her, right? Like we sense. There's a flavor, an odor, a vapor, a perfume, something very amorphous, but you can't grab it. That's Yechida. And that's the pshitus of Yechida. And that pshitus of Yechida, as we will continue to learn and explain, is going to be the anchor to pull down this simple Yid, us, really simple Jews, small. Let the tiniest things in the world overwhelm us and exhaust us. And us simple Yidden, are pulling down pshitus of the Ein Sof Hashem himself. Okay, well, I hope just we're talking about being perfumed. We shall be perfumed by learning a mimer, because there's nothing more God straight than a mimer. Like, people have like little shots, flavor infusers. So that's like a mimer, just a shot of God energy. And just that perfume of it should perfume everything we're doing with the Avishter energy. Thank you so much for joining.